Alright, thank you for that. Let's move on to the next ship, which is the Merlin.
Oh, yes, the Merlin.
Now I'm going to say this right away. This is a prime example of what happens when you have two different players that have two different levels of skills. For example, there's some things, as you can see on my screen, that I can't fit that he has. For example, some of his Tech 2 stuff. So what you would typically do, and this is what I do at least, is you would get the equivalency of what it would be in the meta 1 to 4 range. Typically you want to go for the meta 4s, but there's certain instances to go for the lower ones, like what Shadow said with the X5 webs, is that there may be a meta 3, but they're cheaper and they're just as good as the meta 4s.
Indeed. And also sometimes your meta levels are going to be better for your fit. Then a prime example is this fit entirely. It is extremely extremely tight fit, and with my skills, without my implants that I have for fitting, which I don't plan on using those unless I have a special fit that I want to use for just that day, it literally cannot fit the fleeting propulsion inhibitor. The X5 has one less CPU, which allows this whole fit to work. Otherwise, you would not be running with a web. This fit, though, is, as I said, it is very, very hard to fit, but it is a very standard fit as well as far as Merlins go. Almost everyone who flies a Merlin has this fit in their book to play. It's just a very solid fit. The Merlin off the get-go has a resist bonus, so it's going to have more overall shield resistances than what your standard ship has. So you don't need to resist it as much. So instead of that, you throw that big medium shield extender to get you more hit points to eat through, which eats up so much power grid that you have to put on that micro power core. And then with your afterburner, scrambler, and web, you basically have all the tools you need to dictate the range of the fight, and except for very few circumstances. But you can grab your target and you basically say, unless you've got an afterburner and a web yourself, I'm going to be right where I want to be, which is touching your ship with my ship, hitting you with those ion cannon rounds. Or sorry, neutron cannon rounds.
What would be the few examples in which you won't be able to dictate the ranges?
The few examples will be if you're fighting. I'm guessing that the best option would be a rifter, also fit with a web and a scramble and an afterburner, because he's going to have a slightly higher speed than you, but it's not going to be much. Or if you're fighting something that happens to have two webs, he's going to greatly outspeed you, and he's going to have that afterburner to keep away from you most of the time if they've got dual webs, because they're not worried about you getting about you being able to keep them from running away. So they're just going to have the two webs, because if they need a bail, they can just turn away and go away, because they've got twice the amount of webbing power that you do. It doesn't happen very often, but you'll usually find that kind of scenario if you're fighting a ship that outclasses your ship. Like if you're fighting, a great example is the Daredevil. It's got a bonus towards web velocity, so it's single web access too. And he can basically say, no, I don't want to fight you, to just about anything, and turn around and just back away. Because there's no way you can keep up with him unless you have dual webs or you have something that shuts down his propulsion.
Now, how would you typically set this ship up when you're in a Plex?
This ship, what you basically do is I never use this guy to assault a Plex usually, because it is a brawler fit through and through, and it's not very fast. But what I usually do is I set myself up dead on the beacon, and the second I see a target flying in, which I keep my eye on, close range D-scan to see what's coming. If I think I can take it, the second that he shows up on grid, I start to approach him, afterburner on, scramble overloaded, and web overloaded, so wherever he lands, the only time that he has to get away from me is the amount of time it takes me to lock. And as I am locking him, I am still approaching him at full speed. So if he has webs, I'm still going to drift into him, because the optimal range on these guns is so close that literally the best damage that you can apply is when your ship is pushing his ship around.
Where in the Plex would you set up? Because you did say that you'll be burning towards the person as they're showing up.
You want to sit directly on the beacon. As you come into a Plex, there is a beacon that is where you warp into from the acceleration gate. You approach that beacon, and your ship will be within a 2,500 meter radius of the ship that's coming in. Now that ship can appear in any side of there, but as he comes in and you approach, your ship will automatically start to chase him down regarding where he is. And usually with the lag delay, once you see him and you start clicking, your ship's not actually going to start moving until he is almost where he's going to be. So if he's landing behind you, you're not going to burn towards him and then turn back around. You're usually just going to start turning around immediately.
Alright, that's some nice insight. Let's